Boker Tov, good morning and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. As today we're going to learn about how to talk to God. A lot of people struggle with talking to God. And other people I find just seem to stream naturally. I tend to find that women, at least in my experience, the women have a much more natural conversation with God. Whereas men are kind of, again, this is an overgeneralization, but at least in my experience, men sometimes tend to get stuck in the formalities and they don't really know how to approach God, how to engage. Whereas women, they're just chatting like all day. My wife tells me I don't need to come to shul to daven. I pray all day long, every day, every hour of the day. I'm davening. I'm talking to God all day. Right? The question is how are you supposed to talk to God? What can we learn from the weekly Torah portion this week with Jacob? A fascinating insight into our forefather Jacob. He's in a very difficult situation. Jacob is now facing his nemesis. He's facing his worst nightmare. And if you haven't read the Bible, by the way, I highly encourage you to read it. I told Chuck the other day that I want to recommend to you to take on a project that's going to take you about 30 years. It's called the Torah Anthology. The Torah Anthology is a book which is an English translation. It is magnificent English translation. You've seen it before?
I have it at home.
Fantastic.
You have the whole set?
It's about, I don't know, 50, 60 books. It covers
No.
more than that?
No. Well, I must be abridged.
Yeah, you must be having a bridge version. It's about 50 or 60 books, and what it covers is all of the 24 books of the Bible in English, expanded with all the medrashim as a commentary. And if you just read it, you'll just get an understanding of the entire written Torah, all 24 books. Highly encourage you. It's about $900 to buy the whole set. You can buy one book at a time, see if you like it.
It's on sale.
It's on sale. Highly encourage. Called the Torah Anthology. Torah Anthology, guys. Take a Torah study at the next level. Every day you can read a little bit.
With this group here, the money's not the problem.
No.
It's for 30 years.
You know what? Let me tell you.
Take the underroll for us.
You gotta have what to look forward to, my friend. You gotta be able to look forward to something. And I find that when people retire, they feel like they run out of juice, they run out of steam. But when you've got a 40-volume, 50, 60-volume set that you got to finish, let me tell you, you got what to live for. It's logotherapy. It's Viktor Frankl. It says if you have a why, you'll find the how to get there. Anyways, back to business, guys. So what happens over here with Yaakov, and I highly encourage you to get to know Yaakov, Jacob, our forefather. Jacob is facing his darkest nightmare. This is Esau. He's been running away from this guy for 34 years. 34 years, this guy's been wanting nothing else but to kill his brother Jacob. Why? Because Jacob stole the blessings. We learned about that recently, right? So what is he going to do now when he approaches his brother? I'm not going to get into the details of how he approaches his brother, where he comes in with a triple approach. There's one of prayer, one of military, and one of diplomacy. That's for another sermon. But I do want to talk about one very interesting component of his approach. And it's actually going to be over the page on page 205. Here, top of the page. So Jacob is now preparing for, he was frightened. He was pretty afraid. Well, let's go to bottom of 203. He sends out scouts to check out the temperature, to get the temperature on Jacob, in Esau. And they come back and it's not pretty. Your brother's coming to meet you with 400 armed men. Right? So, bottom of 203, Jacob was very frightened over the prospect that he might be killed and distressed over the prospect that he might have to kill others. He divided the people who were with him, that means his wives and children, along with the flocks, the cattle, and the camels, into two camps. Thus he said, even if Esau comes to the first camp and attacks it, the remaining camp will survive. Okay, 205. Jacob thus said of God, when you appeared to me at Bethel and identified yourself as God of my forebearer Abraham and God of my father Isaac, you promised to protect me wherever I would go. When you appeared to me in Padan Aram and identified yourself simply as God, you said to me, this is a few weeks ago in Lavan, in the house of his father. He said, you said to me, return to your land and to your birthplace, and I will make things go well with you. As I'm now preparing to confront my brother Esau, and I'm desperately in need of your aid in doing so, so I must now invoke both of these promises. I'm just reminding you, God. I'm counting on you. I'm doing this only because you told me to, not once, but twice. Yet I fear that my numerous sins have offset most of my merits, and that the kindnesses that you have already shown me, therefore, constitutes a full reward for whatever merits may have remained to my credit. If so, I am no longer worthy of your protection due to all the acts of kindness and trustworthiness that you have already done for me, your servant. After all, I crossed this Jordan River on my way to Haran. with nothing to my name but my staff. And now, thanks to your kindness, I've become the head of two camps, one consisting of a large family and the other consisting of the great wealth I have amassed. Therefore, I must petition you anew for your protection. This time in the merit of my forebears, save me, please, from the hand of my brother, who is now preparing to greet me with brotherly affection. Save me from the hand of Esau the wicked, for I am afraid that he may come and attack me and my family, my mothers and children alike. Let's just finish it up. And you've already said, I will surely make things go well with you, both in your own merit and in the merit of your forebears, and I will fulfill through you the promise I made to Abraham. I will make your descendants like the grains of the sand of the seashore, i.e., that they will become too numerous to count. So first of all, it's interesting insight there about how to talk to God. He's having a full-on conversation here with God. You know, one-on-one, this is fantastic. It's a nice insight as to how you're supposed to talk to God. It doesn't have to be with formalities. Just talk. Like you talk to your friend, you talk to your rabbi, just talk. Now, one thing I'd like to draw your attention to is this thing about the staff. For after all, I crossed the Jordan River on the way to Haran with nothing but my staff. Why did he have nothing but his staff? Jacob was coming from his father's house. He was a wealthy man, Yitzchak. So why was he penniless? So Rashi tells us last week that the reason he was penniless is because Esav didn't want to kill Jacob in his father's lifetime. Esav respected his father, Yitzchak. He waited for his father to die. But he figured he could send his son, Eliphaz, son of Esav, to go and murder Jacob on the way. So Eliphaz meets Jacob, and he has respect as his uncle. So he says, look, my dad sent me on a mission. You know, my dad loves to honor his father. And the one thing I've learned from my father Esau is that you always have to listen to your father. So my dad told me to come murder you. So Hineni, I'm here. So Jacob's like, what do you want me to do about that? So he said, well, I have to fulfill the will of my father. So Jacob says, listen, let me make you a compromise. I'll make you a deal. It says that a poor person is considered like dead. And therefore, if you just take all my possessions, you will have fulfilled the obligation to make me like dead. And I'll be able to live, so we'll have a good compromise. He says, deal. So Eliphaz takes all of his possessions. He leaves them just with his stick. And Yaakov goes out. So that's one interpretation here as to why it was that Jacob was impoverished when he arrives to meet his wives, Rachel and Leah, and Bilhah and Zilpah. That's one reason. So he had only his staff. In other words, because of his precarious position, because of his negative, weak position. But there's another interpretation that Rashi brings to us. And Rashi tells us, Kiva Makli, well, the first interpretation I just said. The second interpretation comes from the Medrash, that Jacob put his staff into the Jordan River, and guess what happened? He split open the river. Now, that's pretty cool. That's one way to travel. That's like first class, you know? He's like, water, no problem, right? So that's the second interpretation. Now, these two interpretations couldn't be more polar opposite from each other. The first interpretation implies Jacob's weakness or spiritual detriment, that he was impoverished, he was poor. And the second interpretation reflects his spiritual strength, that he had the ability to even split open the Red Sea. Now, so split open the Jordan, I'm sorry. Now, he was the first guy to do this, by the way. Interesting, right? Actually, there was somebody else who did it before him. It's very interesting that righteous people you could associate with water. It's interesting that all the wives of the patriarchs met at the well, at the bar. But also, how did Jacob, for example, Jacob bless Pharaoh? Remember how Jacob blesses Pharaoh? That the waters should rise up to greet him as he walks through Egypt. The waters of the river Nile should flood the banks as he walks by them, right? So it's this great blessing of righteousness that he gives to Pharaoh, which is why Pharaoh became deemed as a god. But there was another story just to make reference to Abraham. When Abraham was on the way to binding his son upon the altar, the Satan formed a river in front of him to block him. And it was an apparition, but Abraham was unintimidated and he marched through it and the water split. So there, it says it might not have been the first one here to do it, but just interesting insight. Anyways, back to the story. The Rebbe asks the question. The Rebbe says, look, if the same word in Torah has two different interpretations, those two interpretations have got to be connected because they come from the exact same word, because my staff. Kiva Makli, because of my staff. The fact that it says my staff as a reference to his spiritual destitution or his physical destitution, financial, and the same blessing which speaks about his spiritual greatness, it's got to be related because it's coming from the same exact word. Furthermore, the Rebbe asks another question. He says, why was Jacob afraid anyways? It says, we read that before, right? At the very beginning, bottom of 203. We said, Vayiro Yaakov me'oit. Yaakov, Ma'od vayetzer le. Jacob was very frightened and distressed. What was he afraid of? He was afraid of Esau?
He used up his capital
Oh, hang on. So before you go there, just before you get to that answer, which is good, Jacob was afraid. Why was he afraid? Because of Esau. But 1 second. Didn't God already tell him, don't be afraid. I'll protect you wherever you go? He said, you promised to protect me wherever I go, right? You to return to your land, your birthplace, and I'll make things go well with you. So, like, he's got this guarantee from, this is not an international guarantee from the United States of America that southern Lebanon would ever be militarized after Israel evacuated southern Lebanon in 2000, right? This is not an international guarantee that America gave to Israel that the Straits of Tiran would never be blocked for Israeli shipping after the 1956 Sinai campaign, when Israel withdrew from the land that they conquered. This is not an international guarantee from the United Nations. This is an international guarantee from God Almighty. And that's impressive. God doesn't bounce his checks, right? His credibility is flawless. Well, you might argue with that, but well, in process, how about that? So why then was Jacob afraid? And like you correctly point out, Jack, the answer is clear. Like he says very soon after, such a beautiful word. I just want you to see the word in Hebrew on 204, the second line in 204. It's the last word. I'm no longer worthy. Katonti translates as like, I'm small. I'm smallified.
become small.
I'm smollened. I'm smallified. I've become small. In other words, I'm humbled. I've made myself small. You have made me small. It's such a fascinating word. You can't even translate it to English. That, English, the society we live in is one about selfies and self-promotion. And my car, my house, my vacation, my wife, my this, my that, right? Everyone's promoting. Whereas this word is the opposite of the selfie generation. This is, I'm small. I'm humbled because of all of the kindnesses that you have bestowed upon me. Like, I don't think I'm worthy anymore because you've been so good to me. I feel like I've used up all my tokens. I've used up all of my credits and I'm left destitute, right? This is Jacob's mindset. Like Rashi points out, that he was concerned, I might have become soiled through sin. This is a true righteous man who says, this is his humility. I might have been soiled through sin. But let's be honest about this. I mean, this is a guy that can split open the Jordan River with his cane, right? And he just did it the other day, right? So he just split open the River Jordan with his cane. So what really is he talking about?
Well, that's the issue already. God already did a miracle for him that he was able to open the.
The Tehillim in Psalms 99. Chapter 99 of Psalms, we say, Mishpat utzedakah b'Yaakov v'atasiso. Mishpat utzedakah b'Yaakov v'atasiso, which means justice and kindness with Jacob you have performed. Justice and kindness. What does justice mean? Justice means you gave him what he deserved. Kindness means you gave him what he didn't deserve. Right? That's the difference between justice and kindness. Justice is your just deserts, and kindness is what you don't deserve. It's compassion, right? So what happens now is that we notice this verse in King David's Psalms that is telling us that Jacob is straddling two lanes simultaneously. On the one hand, he really is deserving justice. At the same time, he opts not to cash in on what he deserves. Rather, he opts for humility and asking for kindness. He says, God, I'm not asking you for what I deserve. I'm asking you to give me even if I don't deserve.
That's fascinating.
Why is that fascinating to you?
Because it's ultimate faith. That's the only reason that he could do that. And I also think that Jacob knew that he didn't split the river and knew where the power came from.
So you're saying that Jacob understood that it wasn't him, it was the miracle of God. It's very interesting you say that, because Joseph also, when Joseph was in the dungeon and they ask, when Pharaoh asks him, so I heard that you know how to solve dreams. To whom does he attribute the ability to solve dreams? He says, Halo le'elokim pitronim. Is it not God who has all the answers. There's this profound sense of humility, which is consistent throughout the greatest, most worthy, ironically, the most worthy people of our history are the ones that exhibit the most extraordinary and unusual degree of humility, where they truly deflect and they truly do not attribute their greatness and success to themselves, but rather to God, opting to see themselves merely, at best, as a conduit for God's blessing.
And isn't that why Moses never made it into the land of Israel?
Why did Moses not make it in the land of Israel? Tell me why.
Because he hit the rock and made it appear as if he brought forth the water rather than it being God.
Because he hit the rock and he tried to take the credit for himself?
Yeah.
It appeared.
I'm glad that you disagree as well. We've spoken about this before.
Yes.
I just want to remind you that the reason why Moses hit the rock was not because he was trying to one-up God. There's just a bit of a tangent, but I just address it briefly. He was trying to defend the people that were not worthy. In brief, if Moses would have entered the promised land, Mashiach would have come, and the generation that died in the desert from their sins would never have experienced redemption. He needed to find a pretext for which he'd be denied access into the promised land in order to delay the coming of the Mashiach so that those people would have a second chance. But I don't want to digress to that. I'm coming back here a second. I'm coming back. So I'm going back to Jacob here a second, folks. Listen to this. So Jacob is truly worthy. Oh, think about this a second. Moses. Talk about Moses thing. Imagine God called you up one night and said, "Listen, I need you to be my my messenger to mankind." How would you feel about this? Honored. What? Well, you're being honest about it. You're like,
no, you'd be humbled. You'd
You'd
be humbled.
but like, yeah.
You should be humbled.
You say, I'm humbled, but I'll do it.
I have to do this again?
You know how Moses reacts? Yeah. You know how Moses reacts?
Why me?
7 days he's arguing with God at the burning bush. 7 days. He's like, God, I'm assuring you, you got the wrong guy. I mean, God, you're God and everything, I know. But maybe you just don't know me well enough. Because Moses was truly humble. Like, he wasn't like, God, I'm humbled, but I'm honored. I'll be there. Just tell me when. Right? He didn't do that.
How is humble different than frightened?
How is humble different from frightened? Wow. Frightened is weakness. Humbled is strength. Wow. Nice. So this theme you see consistently throughout the sages and the greats of our people. I'll even tell you this. Joseph is very inspiring to me because Joseph starts off as an arrogant you-know-what. Oh, I'm sorry. Scratch that. Sorry. He's arrogant. Joseph is like, he's combing his hairstyles. He's walking around, she says, on the balls of his feet.
Got the nice coat.
Yeah, he's getting all the latest fashion. Joseph was all into himself and he's telling his brothers, I'm going to be king of you one day, right? Doesn't care about the feelings. Father had another dream. You want to hear? I'm not asking you. I'm going to tell you. Joseph gets humbled. He gets sold as a slave. And how does he react to that terrifying experience? He says, I deserve to be humbled. And then he gets more humbled. He gets thrown into the dungeon. And he doesn't say, this is not right. Me? I don't deserve this. No. He says, if I'm here, it means that I need to be further humble. And then he gets an extended stay at the dungeon for an extra 2 years for having been nice to the butler and the baker. And instead of saying, for this I get punished, no, he doesn't say that. He says, if I'm further extended into the dungeon, I need to be further humbled. And it's when Joseph is scraping the bottom of the barrel of his dignity and his honor, what happens then? That's when he skyrockets to become the strongest and most mighty Jew that lived in the history of the world. At least, the second in control, the prime minister of the world's superpower. Joe Lieberman came close, but he didn't make it. So this is Joseph. How does Joseph skyrocket to such greatness? Through extreme humility. It's interesting, Rashi tells us in the portion of Noach that there was, of all the descendants of Noach, there was one guy who had much more kids than everybody else. He was extraordinarily fertile. What was his name? His name was Yaktan. Yaktan. What was the root of Yaktan? Katan, which means small. Rashi points out, why is this guy more fertile than everybody else? Because he made himself humble. His name was Yaktan, because his parents understood by divine prophecy, as I mentioned in Shabbos, that his parents understood that this was a humble person. And because he made himself small, that's why he experienced extraordinary success. In other words, look at it this way. If you're going to ask God for what you deserve, okay, how much you think you deserve? 5, 7, 9? But if you say, God, I'm not asking you to give me what I deserve. Instead, you say, God, I'm asking you to give me what you're capable of. Now it's not 5 or 7 or 9. Now it's like 57 trillion, right? It's completely a different game of reference here. Do you know what I mean? It's limitless. It's a limitless reference. There is no limitation to God Almighty. So when you talk to God, don't ever make the mistake of talking for what you deserve. Jacob, like it says in Psalms 99, Mishpat tzedakah, justice and kindness are the attributes of Jacob. Jacob could have asked for what he deserved. He had justice. He had all of the merits, if anybody ever did. And he also had kindness. And what does he choose? He says, Katointi, I am smallified. I am humbled. I have made myself small, or if you have made me small, or I feel that I'm no longer worthy, I'm no longer deserving, and I'm begging you, God. In other words, he says, I'm afraid. Why am I afraid? I'm afraid not because I don't trust you, God. Because why would you protect me? I don't feel like I'm deserving. And there's nothing more appealing, more attractive, more exciting for God Almighty than an attitude of gratitude, than a mindset of humility. On the flip side, it says that there is nothing that repels the presence of God more than ego. He and I cannot coexist. Who cannot coexist with God? The man of ego. Ego is the repellent of God. It's a God repellent. And what is the God? What is that thing for the hurricane? The lightning. The lightning rod. What draws the lightning? Right. The lightning rod for God is humility. And this is what we're learning from Jacob. Go ahead.
But you have, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chuck.
I got a question too. When I think of kindness in talking to God, it's humble and I don't deserve, right?
Yes.
What about when kindness is applied to doing something for somebody else, somebody who's unfortunate? Should I say that they don't deserve it?
Look, if you're praying for the Jewish people, let's say, right? Let's say you're praying for the Jewish people, right?
Okay, do they not deserve, or
you can apply the same principle. Look, first of all, when it comes to somebody else, you can say, listen, God, why are you doing this? Me, I'm full of sins, but they have no sins, right? When you look at somebody else, you're not supposed to see the negative. You only need to look at the positive, positivity bias. But at the same time, if you apply the spirituality of this principle, is what kind of blessing does Israel need right now? Does Israel need a limited blessing vis-a-vis what they deserve? Or do they need an unlimited blessing, which is vis-a-vis what God is capable of? Don't peg it to their capacity. Peg it to God's capacity. Don't peg it to their worthiness. Attach it to God's capacity.
but when you think of charity, right? Should I be thinking that the people that I am benefiting, benefactor for them, that they don't deserve what I'm giving them?
No.
Deserving out of the vocabulary.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, drop the deserving thing. On the contrary, by the way, I want to tell you something. When you give charity, when you give charity,
I don't deserve.
I want to tell you, when you give charity, you're supposed to give more than you're comfortable with. Get out of your box. And you're supposed to give charity even to people that don't deserve it. You know why? Because when you give charity to people that don't deserve it, then God is forced to give you charity when you don't deserve it. Break free. Set yourself free. What was your question, Warren?
Talking about being humble and so forth. We hear quite often, every once in a while, we hear "fake it till you make it." Is that a sincere comment or just not to use the word joke, but how would God, if you faking it till you make it?
Wait, if you fake humility, you mean?
That's hard. But you have said.
I believe so. Yeah, I do believe so. By the way, I do believe that you can fake humility. I do believe.
Who's the man who is?
Just let me answer this question. So I want to say this, Velvel, that if you fake humility, which means that you accustom yourself to perhaps self-deprecate, and if you accustom yourself to shy away from the limelight, then I do believe that will have a lasting impact on you at a later stage. So I do think that you can.
No, but I
Very-
think Rebel's point, the way I understand it, is how sincere really was Jacob here? He had cheated his brother out of his birthright, put on this garb, he cheated him, and now he's thinking to himself, you know what? Maybe God's doing a sudden review.
I don't think
who
so.
I am.
I don't think he was a ganef. Remember, he had purchased the birthright from his brother, fair and square.
Yeah, to deal with it.
Fair and square. You sold the birthright.
That's where-
You make your bed.
That's a
You
good
sleep in
deal.
it. Yeah, you make your bed. You
Well,
sleep in it.
so-
Yeah, he felt that his birthright was worth a bunch of beans.
Like you have said in the past, I remember distinctly, that it's okay to pray for wealth. Because with wealth, you can do.
100%. But why are you praying for wealth?
No, not for yourself necessarily, but so you can do mitzvahs.
Absolutely, 100%. I do not disagree in the slightest bit. Absolutely. I completely respect that you should. And you know, a lot of people, I think I want to extend it from wealth. A lot of people tell me, they say, Rabbi, I'll pray for my kids, pray for my wife, I'll pray for my parents. I don't pray for me. So I'm like, who's going to take care of you? Me. I take care of me. Everybody else I need to pray for. And that is the wrong approach. Because God, it's ego. Exactly. That's the repellent. Why would you do that? God wants you to pray to him. He wants you to turn to him. Imagine you had a child that never spoke to you. Because I take care of myself. Hello? Dad wants to talk to you, right? Remember that God doesn't give us prayers so that we can solve our problems. He gives us problems so that we can pray.
But we're talking about humility, not as.
So I want to extend that to you to say that it's not just about wealth, even health, even happiness, even consciousness, even peace of mind, everything, all of the above, even your golf swing. You should pray. Why shouldn't you pray for your golf swing? Yeah, I want to have a good golf swing. What's wrong with that? Right?
There's a lot.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of praying on the golf course.
Exactly.
But the man who's humble, he is confident, right?
Yes, confident because he knows that he's carried by the power, powered by the power of God Almighty.
And he's peaceful.
Yes. As opposed to the one I just described, as opposed to the person that I just described, who is actually not at peace because he is the master of his own destiny. And he feels that he's the captain of his own ship without any divine intervention. And that's pretty unnerving and unsettling. And now we can finally understand why it is that the same exact word, my staff, my cane, Jacob's cane, is used to describe seemingly polar opposite explanations. One describing his strength and the other describing his weakness, right? That he was very, very poor or that he was very, very, very meritorious, because it's actually interdependent. The reason why Jacob was so powerful, the ability to split open the river, is because he was so humble. It's because he was so destitute. It's actually one and the same. So we too, who are perhaps far, far away from the level of Jacob, nevertheless, we are still sons of Jacob. B'nai Israel. We're the children of Israel. The sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Israel's other name is Jacob, right? We are the DNA, the descendants of Jacob, and therefore, we too deserve to receive just like our dad did. You know why? In the merit of our fathers.
That's the
So-
whole point of starting the Amidah, as we do.
Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. So you could come in with justice and say, God, listen, you owe my family. You owe me, you owe my family. We could come in with that approach. But nevertheless, we don't do that. We don't come in with this approach of Magia li. Magia li in Hebrew means like I deserve it. Don't ever take that approach when you talk to God. Right? Don't say, you've done this to me, God, and now you owe me that, right? Don't come with that approach. Rather, come in with the approach that God is your father, not your boss. That's the way to talk to God. Don't talk to God as an employer. Talk to God like a dad. And say, Dad, you know what? I know I messed up. I know I didn't deserve it, but you're my dad. That's how you're supposed to talk to God. This is what we learned from Jacob. And just like Jacob experienced extraordinary success beyond his dreams and expectations, so too, we too will experience the blessings of fertility and nachas from our children. Can you imagine nachas from all of your children, all of your grandchildren? Wouldn't that be amazing? Right? Blessings of health and longevity. Blessings of sustenance, and all of them in a way which is ample. Can you imagine no matter which stage you are in life, to be affluent, to be rich, not only physically, financially, but also spiritually and intellectually. Can you imagine being emotionally affluent, where you're not needy and you're not stuck and you don't get triggered? You just are affluent, you're broad, you're magnanimous, you can handle it. Imagine living in such a way. That's something which we should be praying for. We say, God, listen, I know I didn't deserve it, but like Jacob, I wish that you can, I ask that you can endow me with these extraordinary blessings. The attitude of gratitude, this humility is katonti. It's that one word. It's that one word. And I encourage you to take this word, katonti, which means I have made myself small, and make it your password for your most important password. You know, whether it's your Gmail or your bank account or your vault or your safe or something, you know, your some important password. Remember, every letter in Hebrew is a number, right? Every letter in Hebrew is a number. So if you had to do this, the word katonti is kuf is 90 or 9, and then tes is again 9. Oh, kuf is 100. Forgive me. Thank you very much. Thank you. So kuf is 100, right? 100. Then tes is 9. Then the nun is 50, and then the taf is 400, and the yud is 10. So imagine you make a password like 100, 9, 50, 400, and 10. Or you just drop the zeros. Just drop the zeros, and just do 1, 9, 5, 4, 1. 19541. If that becomes your password, 19541. I'm sorry, don't.
You'll be in my bank account. The hell with that.
1941.
19541. Now it doesn't have to be this word, folks. Remember, I want you to try to pick your favorite word in Torah.
How do you spell that word?
It's written right here in the Torah, 203. Top of page 204, second line. So I want to encourage you to consider taking a word that you want to connect with. I want to encourage you taking a word that is an important meditation, an important directive for you in Torah, and own it. Now, this one, don't put on YouTube. Don't tell anybody, right? Maybe you can approach me or someone else to try to help you do the numerical value on it, and make that your password. So every time you get into your bank account, can you imagine? Every time you get into your bank account, you're like, 1 second, how do you spell humble again in Hebrew? Right. And then you're meditating as you're getting into your bank account or your safe or whatever else. Right? You're meditating upon this concept. What a beautiful idea to be able to always imbue yourself with humility. Maybe your front door you want to do this password for, right? 19541, whatever. You figure it out. Your garage, I don't know. You figure it out. You make this your password, and you don't just remember the numbers. You remember the code, right? Like my wife knows. She asked me the other day, what's the code for the bank? I'm like, how do you spell this word in Hebrew, right? And I said to her, I said, what's the word? I said, what's the word?
What word was that?
I said, what's the word?
And which bank?
Right? And she was like, oh, that's the word. And I said, Nusa, tell me the code. So she was, I was like, okay, now you know. Because I wanted her to think about it, So when you get into the bank, that's what you do. And if we can take this attitude, we can really, really change the game. Like Jacob overcame his nemesis. He overcame his nightmare with extraordinary success, because that's what happens in the end of the story. The guy, after 34 years of trying to kill him, what does he do? He gives him a kiss and a hug. And they become best buds. It was like a miraculous turnaround to anti-Semitism. If we can do the same, to come in with utter humility before God, not humility before our enemies, by the way, humility before God, and saying, God, I can't believe that you're still protecting us 3,500 years later. I'm so grateful. You know what you've done to me in my life, God? Look at this family you've given me. Look at this house you've given me. Look at this car, this job, at this profession, at this shul, at this community, at whatever you're grateful for. Think about it. They're like, I can't believe you've done this all for me. I'm so incredibly grateful. Katonti mikoila chasadim. I am smallified. I'm humbled because of all of these kindnesses, and God willing, from that we will experience extraordinary blessing. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care. Have a great day. Yom Tov.